Did you see that email that I sent you?
Oh, yeah, I did. Oh, I thought so. Because I was trying to figure out.
Because I emailed every individual.
Oh, okay. Oh, then no, that's good. Then we'll work on it. Okay. Well, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. District 1, Councilman Rios.
Here.
District 2, Councilman Pastor.
Here.
District 3, Councilman Leatham.
Present.
District 4, Vice Mayor Stapleton is excused. District 5, Councilman Gonzalez.
Here.
District 6, Councilman Shipley.
Here.
Mayor Gameros.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Shelley. Dear Lord, thank you that we could be gathered here today to do the community's work. Please help us to be good stewards of all our resources, especially water. Thank you for the rain that you've given us and moisture that we've received. But please help us to do good planning and put all our heads together to make the best choices for our community. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We got item 1A, we got city presentation, city goal presentation.
And Mr. Mayor, I'm going to invite, Jerry got short straw on prime presenter, but we have all of staff here that was involved in many aspects of this. So any questions, we can get the right person to speak. Also, wouldn't mind staff, if you do want to speak, we're happy to have that, but we need to make sure we have a microphone of some sort for you. We may find a microphone we can pass around, but this is being recorded on YouTube and broadcast. So we have this as a reference for the future, because there's a lot of information going to be shared here. It's probably not, we've had meetings before on water. This will not be the last one. One of the future agenda items we had promised was to get council, at least where we're at, what's the starting point for the city of Globe, our water supply, our water security. And this is that meeting, but there's many aspects that we'll probably be talking again about. Mayor, go ahead. So with that, I'll turn it over to Consultant Jerry Barnes.
Good. City engineer Jerry Barnes. Good. But yeah, we were all standing up, and he said, anybody that wants to volunteer for this presentation, step forward. I looked back and everybody went like that. So here I am. Today we want to talk about our water infrastructure, where we're at, what kind of shape our wells are in, our tanks and so forth. And so I'm just going to jump right in. So this first slide is a map of the well locations that we have. There's 19 on this map. Some of them don't belong to us. Some of them are not operable. What we do currently have is 7 wells that we use. 5 at the Cutter Fields, 1 at Pine Street, and 1 at the Hayden Tanks, just below the Hayden Tanks. And so the other wells could be re-drilled The Liso well, or Liso wells, have high arsenic contents, but that can be treated. There's options just about every one. The most, outrageous option is to, close that well down and drill right next to it. So, that's the most costly one. That's an outrageous, but the most costly. So I wanted to talk about the current wells that we have. Cutter one, annually produces, and these are our metered output of these wells over the last year. So on an annual basis, Cutter one puts in 157 million gallons into our system. Cutter two, 115, Cutter three, 90, or 72, Cutter four, 64, and 5 is 19. And you can see that our higher producing wells, they are a higher percentage of it, that the percentage that you see is how much time out of the day and the week that these operate. So, and they're set up on a cycle to where they do cycle in and out, so we don't wear them out all at once. It's like buying a new car and then using it every day and leaving the old one set. It's not a real productive thing to do. So, and Pine Street well is the one that I have here in front, is operates 63% of the time and produces just over 1 million gallons a year. And then the Hagen tank is the one we just below the Hagen tank that we had. It was lead. We had issues with John, right? And we shut it down, and then we had it retested, and we did a couple of treatments to the well, and it's back in production anyway. It beats all the standards, but tested, and it produces about 4 million gallons of water a year, and it pumps directly into our tanks up on top of the
Jerry, if you just come back on the percentage of use, you say, these are percentages of use during the time. What is the time? Is it
The time is, these are used, these runs 69% of the day.
so these are daily uses?
These are hourly minute rates, and they actually have them converted over to a minute, and then I converted them to a percentage based on the entire year, so that would be perfect. Yeah, so, yeah.
And Jerry, on those percentages, what's the expected lifespan of a pump in the well? A year?
So we try to maintain our pumps on a 5-year cycle, and we want to make sure that we do some sort of maintenance to them every 3 years. But on a 5-year cycle, we consider that major, where we pull the pumps and we rehab the casings and probably the pump and the turbo on it as well. So and then we have some that take we have some that take a little bit more care because we have more sand in the wells, and we can keep a good eye on them, and they're also some of our bigger producers, and so we keep a better eye on them. And that's what you pulled 3 out after 2 years or 3 years. 3 years. So anyway, we try to do more there because we have to do more maintenance, so we keep them running. Okay?
So, real quick, so we are pulling basically 1,333 acre feet.
Acre feet
And are allowed up to 2,500 out of the Cutter wells, right?
out of the Cutter field, Cutter aquifer. But the Hagen and the Pine Street pull out of different aquifer.
Okay.
So, and so that's why it's, I think Jody showed 1307 or something like that, and the additional acre feet is because of the Pine and the Hagen wells.
Now,
And
the
then-
Aliso well is considered part of the same.
No, it sets up over the ledge, and so it has a different basin. And so, as it was explained to me by the Clear Creek people that did the survey, they said it sits up over and therefore, none of the things past the basin have the arsenic in it. And so we chose not to do the Aliso wells because we would have to put a treatment on them that would be a little costly, but it's, if we ever run short of money, we've got the whole basin there that we can tap into. Or short of, was it money, I mean, of water. But, and then the last column here is if the pumps ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, year round, and then we would be pumping 3,200 acre feet out. And as you know, that's not what we can do out at Cutter, so, or Cutter.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Jerry, real quick, the Pine Street in Hagen, are they in the Gila conglomerate?
So they're both in the Gila.
And then, but the Aliso is not Gila or Cutter. It's a third aquifer that we're not.
Part of Aliso is part of the Cutter aquifer, but it's a different basin.
All right.
It's a different basin. You know, we'd have to get somebody to look at that. But when I talked to the Clear Creek people out here, when Brent was here, they explained to me it was on a natural ledge, and therefore the arsenic level on that couldn't spill into the aquifer we were in. But it was a basin, and it was a fairly deep basin after that ledge. So
But it would apply to the 2,500 acre feet allowed.
I believe that's true. Yes. And I think if I remember the conversation right, because this is 10 years ago when I first got here, but I believe that they said it would cost too much to start those wells back up again, and we did not use up the 2,500 acre feet that we were allotted in the Cutter well, so why put the money in is the way he thought, but it's there. So I also looked at the storage that we have, and we went back and forth on this a little bit. But, the first column is what we typically store in our basins, in our storage tanks, just over 4 million gallons. We could store up to 5.65, and I know the other day we had a little higher than that, but some of these tanks were a little off with size and anything, but these are correct. Is questions on that?
What's the Apache one?
The Apache is 50, correct? 40, and it's Apache Peak. It's where the pump station was down there, and we deactivated the pump station and took the tank offline. I think it would take too much rehab to actually bring that one back. It'd probably be cheaper just to replace it if we were to do that. But, you know, and I think if we have a build out in that area anyway, that tank's gonna have to increase significantly to carry any housing developments in that area, so.
Is Apache Peak in the city? It's not city limits.
It's not city limits, no, but it serves that whole hillside up above Apache Peak. So. Okay. So I wanted to talk about the difference here in what's happened in, this is almost, 25 years or so, or even some more than that. You look at the well-twos, we had sounding tubes down these 4 wells, and that's why you see these go back to into the 1900s. This is a static water level, which is basically, if we didn't do anything, kick on the pumps or anything, our water level would be at this. And that's what you see, and that's how many feet down from the head of the pump. So that's why they're not all uniform, because pumps are at different elevations too, I mean, as far as natural ground. So, and then, and we don't quite know why, but all the data that we have shows that Cutter 3 actually has gone up in water level, 80 some feet. So, we had a half-hour discussion on that this morning. We can't figure it out, but all the data shows that to be true.
Maybe it's all the septic fields up above.
You think?
Yeah.
So, that's almost as good as what John had. No, we lost some in Carter 4, which are close together. And, we're wondering if maybe, because we're pumping them down quite a bit, and 4 and 3 are our two, wells with a lot of sand in them. So, anyway, we're glad that we're not too far off. Overall, I would say, and since I've been here the last 10 years, that you're looking at somewhere around 60 feet, that they fluctuate in the last 10 years, but that means they've come up since then too. Remember, we've gotten all new pumps, all new everything out there, even the shaft, or even the casings and so forth going down to them is all brand new. So, their efficiency is way up. All right, so some useful data. So 100 acre feet of water is about 326,000 gallons. Average in Globe per capita is, per household is 2.3. Average homes use about a third acre feet of water a year. Average person uses about 112 gallons per day. And these are all data that Jody provided as part of her paperwork that she does. And then our Globe water services are about 3,300 right now. So the water usage in the Globe area on a daily basis is about 129,000 gallons. On a yearly basis is up around 426 million gallons. So quite a bit of difference. We talked about before that the acre feet that we're using out of the Cutter aquifer, what we shoot for is 2,500 max, and we're at 1,307 coming out of that aquifer right now. So the maximum well capacity is over 1 billion gallons. That's if you pump 24/7 nonstop with the 7 wells that we're doing. Total tank capacity is 5,650,000. We have approximately 100 miles of water lines within the city of Globe, which is unreal if you think about it. And then we've rehabbed about 30 some miles of those lines over the last 15 years, since 04 anyway, is what I come up with. And we still have about 69, 70 more lines, miles of lines to do. And then in the meantime, we've also done pumps and wells and tanks and pump houses. And I mean, so we've been hitting all the high cost parts of the infrastructure that we need. If we go to replace all the lines that are left, I just throw a side note in, we need about 70 million.
Okay.
Gary, I know we've done a lot of work with the infrastructure and as far as water hydrants and pressure relief valves. Have we seen a difference in water savings doing any of that?
So it's hard to tell, Mayor, because we've got so much construction going on. And construction is a big factor on why we lose so much water. I mean, if we bust a water line open, 12-inch water main, we've had 2 or 3 of those happen in the last month. We lose a lot of water. If we go to rehab tanks, that was just automatically dumping 4 million gallons down back into it. Well, not even into the same aquifer. We took it out of St. Cars or the Cutter aquifer, and we're dumping in the Gila aquifer. So even though it helps us, those are all things, and we call them non-revenue water losses, kind of a segue into that. And so the non-revenue water losses could include things like fire suppression, construction, water, tank repairs, water breaks, bleeding the lines just to get the air pressure out and so forth, and also hydrant testing. Think about how many times you went down the road and there was water running down the road, and come to find out they're doing the hydrant testing. which is a requirement of the fire department. So, that's a lot of water. It isn't wasted water, but it's a lot of water that we don't account for in the revenue stream. So, and then other city uses, filling a swimming pool, that kind of thing. So, we do, some, that isn't accounted. So even though the non-revenue is, as Jody said, is about 93 million gallons, all that isn't leaks. Some of it's leaks, but all of it isn't leaks. If you look at annual loss data, most cities would be very, very proud of a 10% loss. In our city and most surrounding average cities, it's about 20% loss. I think ours is a little bit less than that because of all the construction traffic and all the things that we're doing with our water system right now. We did lay off this last year as far as water lines, even though we have a few water lines being replaced in the CIP. We don't have the multi-million-dollar water replacement because we went sewer this year, and we're trying to catch that up at the same time. But we're in pretty good shape as far as staying around the average. We have a lot of old lines out there, a lot of old lines, and what we're going to talk about. Let's see, let me see here. Now, like I say, 93 million gallons a year is what we about 280 acre feet, about 21% of our water.
Jerry, does the city have any mechanisms in place to separate water loss versus known water loss? Like you said, flushing, where you can separate,
The only
not separate, but X out the known water use.
So we do meter our own water, which is one factor that we don't is accounted for in this revenue, even though we don't pay ourselves. It is accounted for. Jody came up with the final number 93, but we don't have the sophisticated system to where you can say we've had this many gallons leak in this area. We haven't had those tests run. And that's one of the suggestions later on that we'll talk about.
And I know that's gonna be throwing a dart, but at least have something in place where, okay, our estimation was that we flushed 200 gallons a minute to clean up the line, and we flushed the front out. Boom! Now you have a number of known water use. Again, it's not a perfect science, but it's a known water use that you can take out of that 20% of actual water loss. And that way, it kind of narrows the true water loss. And I don't call it true because it's hard to do that, but
Yeah, it gets you
more
closer.
accurate.
Gets you closer. I understand what you're saying.
Water
Jody, we don't
loss.
have anything like that, do we? So right now we don't have anything set up to do that, but it could be done. It could be done within the departments.
And Jerry, Vince had a comment.
We were able to do that on some leaks.
So get up there. You gotta come up. Oh, wait, Danny has a mic for you. There you go.
Everyone.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, we were able to do that with large water leaks. We calculated how much drop was in the water tank and count that surface water to get that calculation. That's like on the larger ones that make the tanks drop so hard. Other than that, no.
So, but you're right, Councilor Rios, we could start a plan to where some of that was logged in and sent in to at least reduce the amount of leakage, that possible leakage to a known quantity of what we lost. So it's possible we could set something like that up, and it'd be fairly simple, just be some training.
I got another question. So we have $5.6 million worth of storage capacity. So if we couldn't pump water at all, how long would water last in the city of Grove with the 5.6 million gallons?
A little over a day. Is that right?
That seems.
Look at it.
Go ahead.
But somebody
Jerry.
do the math.
Maybe it is. I'm looking.
We can.
3 days on peak.
So divide 426 million by 365.
So it looks like we use a daily of 100 and 29,000 gallons, so it's probably 40 days, 50 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, 40, 50 days.
Yeah.
That seems like,
Who said one day?
that seems like.
That's what I was always told.
We had 5 million gallons. That would not last 4 years. No.
I don't think it would either.
So then my other question is, so let's just say hypothetically we lost all the Cutter wells.
Probably 8, yeah.
How do we get water from the remaining wells distributed throughout the community? How does that happen?
Say again now?
So let's just say hypothetically we lose all the Cutter wells.
Okay.
And now we're looking at distributing the water from the remaining wells. So you have one here, you have.
We have 2 left. We have 2 left.
How does that get to
And
where it needs to go to?
those 2 wells, let me pull this up again. Those 2 wells that you're talking about only produce about 5 million gallons a year. That's the only 2 left, and we use 426 million gallons a year.
To answer the question though, Pine Street pumps directly into the system, into the distribution system here. Hagen pumps directly into the Hagen tanks. So that's how they would get into our
I
system.
don't think it answers this question though. So we could not support him on the wells that we have left. We would support him on the tanks, and I'm not a big fan of those numbers on the tank. If we're using 426, I think we're missing a 0, because we're using 426 million gallons a year, and there's 365 days in a year.
Yeah, so that's.
So
Yeah.
I think we're talking about 1.2 million a day. It is.
1.2 million.
Yeah,
So we'd have about 40, we'd have to.
so I was always told by Kenny that we had a good 2 days, and if nothing went wrong, we might be getting 3 or 4. That's what I was.
And if you're in the summertime, you can shrink that number turned to 1.2 million.
Yeah, 1.2. There's a decimal point that's not good.
So Jerry, just a question, so the Cutter wells pump directly to Hagen tanks, or they pump directly into the system?
So they pump through Crestline, through Crestline,
They go to Crestline,
and then from Crestline through the soon-to-be altitude valve to Hagen.
Jerry, do you have the ability to move water from one tank to the other pretty much? Can any one tank fill any other tank? Can you transfer?
We can set the altitude valve so where they can get more or less water in the tanks. They're fed on a gravity system. And we have the ability to fill the tanks up because we can shut them off to the system. But if they're floating in the system, we have to use our altitude valves to lower or raise the level. And that's kind of what Brian Palmer does, is he adjusts those to keep so much of it. Before, if you remember, I showed the depth here on what we try to keep in them, like the Hagen tanks that are 1.5 million tanks, and he tries to keep 1.1 in them. And he does that by adjusting the valves. In this case, we don't have the Crestline altitude valve in, so he actually goes out and manually adjusts them to keep them where they're at.
If I could, just to help this council understand better, I would like to see numbers in gallons per minute as well. Because you're talking acre feet, you're talking acre feet annual. So we have to do reverse math to break down what we're really pumping per day. Whereas if you gave, this well does, 350 gallons per minute, and we know that it runs 70% of the time, we can do the math and figure it out. The other thing is,
And we have those numbers. I didn't share them up here.
if we had a table like that, so that our council could better relate to what these numbers really mean.
Now, Vince developed a spreadsheet that has.
And Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilman Rios, I mean, we wanted to get this presentation done sooner rather than later, just because of all the information going on, all the conversations, all the grant applications. when we met, we had a ton of information, and I forced it down into as bite size as we could do so we weren't here, just to start, with the assumption, like I said, this will not be our last meeting. And any additional information anybody wants, just let us know. We can get those numbers to you at next time. I think there's lots of areas we can bring back more detail instead of flooding you with flooding the zone with everything. And start at the basics, and then we can add in as we go.
Okay.
Okay.
And we can easily send out an Excel sheet with the gallons per minute on the pumps. So we have those readily.
So I have another request.
Okay, what's that?
Since we're talking about how, again, people want to understand how water gets moved, maybe if we had a site map that shows pressure zones, like, the crest line is from this street to this street is one pressure zone. From this street to this street is another pressure zone. And that way, when these questions are asked, like, how can we get water from here to here, you say, well, from this pressure zone, it's a higher elevation, we can flow water into this pressure zone. And I think that answers these questions that are being asked.
So Vince, you have the PRB map?
Yes.
And we can provide that to you, which shows all the pressure zones.
I think I just feel like everybody here would understand a lot better, looking at what a pressure zone is, what it means, how it relates, and how about this?
So because of our topography here in the city, we move a lot of pressure zones around with our pressure regulating valves, which is the big valves that we put in. And we maintain pressure in certain areas with those. Otherwise, if you were just doing gravity fed, it would be hard to push some of this into that area.
And Mr. Mayor, John wanted to.
Councilman Reels, just to add into it with our Citizens Academy, if you remember, we actually, and it'll be on tomorrow night's presentation, we do have that map and we can provide it to every one of you of all our pressure zones. It's actually color coded, and then the kind of the instructional part of why what zones and where they're at.
Has that been updated since we had our new pump station?
Yes, it's added into that.
Jerry, and since we eliminated Arlington Tank and we sold it in our system, our west end is basically distributed with pressure relief valves controlled by relief valves
Yes.
throughout the city.
Yes, and
We have no-
the pump station in Benita.
Okay.
So the PRVs were not enough to get enough higher pressure in that area. So we put the pump station in Benita, which brought that level up. And we still got one more move on our pressure relief valve at the Connie's Bridge that we're removing. We're a later CIP item, you'll see what to move that in a different location to reallocate some of that pressure. And that's in that area too, right?
That's
Haskell area.
What did Bonita do for the pressure on Fairview? I know it was only like 500 gallons a minute up there.
So.
Did it increase it? Did we get it?
500 gallons.
Yeah, it was very low up there whenever we caught fire up there. We knew that was low.
So for the fire, yeah, I don't know what Vince did when the fire did their, when they did their test up there, their fire hydrant test.
Item pressure
Wasn't it 700 or something?
increased a little bit then.
Yeah, I
Slightly
believe,
above what it was.
but I believe that they were done before that we implemented Benita. I think we only had it going during that test, so it's something we probably need to look into.
Okay.
Yeah, we, with all the construction going on, the water crews have been very busy.
Okay.
Because every one of our projects is tying into a water line of some sort.
Did you get the water on over Reach Canyon and today? It's still on?
No.
It's still on?
It's gonna take longer. Little longer.
Yeah, they're connecting to the bridge, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that's been a big ordeal, because our water lines weren't exactly where we thought they were. And then when we hit the deadline, supposed deadline, it wasn't dead. So, okay, so let's move on. So, we're planning for the future. You know, we want to reduce water line leakage. This is a high ticket item. This is replacing water lines that we've had constant problems with and so forth. You know, when we did, I think it was Wallerman, wasn't it, Vince, when we replaced the line out there? I think we replaced about 400 feet of line. Huh? 4,000. But we were hitting clamps like every 10 feet. So you can imagine every one of those clamps that's been put in, and Freddie can tell you those are expensive to put in. And we were hitting them all along there, so we haven't had anything happen since, I don't think. So since we replaced it, so those are the type of priorities that it's best spending our money in something like that, because in the long run, you're gonna save. So, so we need to develop a long-range CIP funding plan. We kind of did that this last year, John. I think John put a pile of money in for replacement of water lines and some for sewer lines as well. And you guys approved that. And we've since put out four water lines, 3 on this one and then the one downtown, right? So 4 water lines. And they were the high priority water lines that just kept breaking. In fact, I got a call from Vince this morning that said, you know, the water line we're replacing, there's a leak out there right now, who's responsible? And so luckily the contractor will take care of it. But anyway, that's where we're going with that. We also need to seek WIF and grant funds to make sure we help out with this area, because this is probably our highest ticket item. I like to say before, if you're going to replace every line and you weren't going to go by priority, you're just going to start one end of the town and replace what hasn't been replaced in the last 15 years, maybe 18 years, you're talking probably about $70 million. And with today's price, it might even be higher than that. So, and then with water lines, especially with some of the valves and so forth, we have a hard time getting those. So it's a lot of lead time. I know that our the 3 lines that we have over on Bailey, Pasquale, and Dickinson that we're replacing, we waited, what, Vince, 2 months on parts for those? 2.5 months? Yeah, so we've been waiting a long time to get those parts. And, yeah.
Jared, can you give us, like you do with pavement, we know what it is per mile per cost, mile per mile. Go to Washington, we got 68 miles of water line to replace, and this is the cost per mile.
It's $188 per.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, 180 per linear foot.
But you would figure close to $1 million per month.
That wasn't including asphalt repair.
Oh, can I ask that?
Yeah.
No.
Well, I mean,
Just digging it up and.
That was main line.
if you're gonna roughly figure, you figure about $1 million a mile. Because some of it's 2 inch, some of it's 6 inch, some of it's 12 inch, you know. So if you're just gonna figure it as a general, is that a close number to what you used, right?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate number, $180 a million.
Yeah. So, but, you know, if you put this out, which I think you should, in the long term, to show a 50-year plan on what you're gonna do with your water system, and that's a recommendation later on. I think that if you figure that you need $2.5 million a year to work on your water lines and your water system, I think that's a pretty good number. And I know when we applied for some of the grants through Connie, that we applied for was 2.2 million for the first phase of the 3-phase grant that we were going to apply for. So, and that would pretty well keep us up with the CIP. You know, last year was kind of bad because we did put some money in the operating through a line item, but the CIP was kind of diverted to sewer because of all the projects we had there. So anyway, the water conservation, a lower dollar item would be to update and expand the city water policy. You need to put verbiage in the code to expand your water usage policy, especially in a time where you need to conserve. Also update the IBC code to 2021, which would help your building inspector out as well.
And Mr. Mayor, members of council, that has a lot of water conservation issues or, factors that are just built into the code. Any new construction would be live up to those standards. I've always heard one of the reasons we haven't gone past 2003 is because no one wanted to stomach doing the power savings and conservation and energy saving stuff in there. And that's why we kind of stuck in that time warp, but it's on the short list plan. It'll be coming soon.
Yeah, that's what Tony told me, that it was the big difference between what we use now and the 2021 was the conservation.
Yeah. And many people build to 2018 right now.
If I could just add, because of the whole water crisis that the Southwest is experiencing, I think water conservation, a push for water conservation will be more palatable with the general public. They'll be more accepting to look at these kinds of mitigation measures. I can tell you, I got an update from my chief hydrologist in my company, and although with all this rain and snowpack, all the reservoirs are filling and they're becoming, some of them are full, some of them are not quite so full, but it's having a great impact. But the one thing it's not going to impact is the Colorado River shortage. All this water is not going to put a dent in the Colorado River crisis. It's going to take years and years and years and years of this kind of weather. So I think, again, I think if there's going to be a conservation, this is going to be a time to do it. It's going to be more palatable with our residents. Because it's everybody's water conservation and the crisis, the drought.
So years ago, we were working on trying to come up with a water conservation plan. And at that point, we were looking at a few things. One was to do like a threshold that would meet the needs of most, like 3-member families, and just say, this amount is this price. But once you exceed that level, it jumps up. It costs you more per 1,000 gallons of water. And then if you,
Tiered rates.
yeah, tiered rates, and then if you go higher because you want a park in your yard, then it's even more for the extra 1,000. And so that way, a normal family wouldn't have to change the way they live so much, but they do not have the big yard. And so those were some things that we looked at. We also, in California, they had problems with power. And they started a refrigerator exchange plan. So they're actually buying people new refrigerators, getting rid of the old ones, and then lowered their consumption of power so that they didn't end up having to build another power plant. And so I was thinking we could do that with toilets, like, especially if you have some of these old 3-gallon flush. My friend had one up until just a few years ago, because it was $1.80 to fix it.
Yeah.
Fernando, if we were to switch to the tier program, would you then see that as going into their account and looking at yearly base their usage on what their previous year was, and then that's what their tier would be at that point?
This tier system is on usage, monthly usage, and we have that right now.
Based off of each individual household, not just a blanket, this is what it is.
Yeah, so if you're asking what I think you're asking about increasing rates based on the tier. Is that what you're asking?
Well, based off of what he said, if this is a 3-person household versus a 4-bedroom household, but I don't want to go out and ask each household how many people live in your home. But if we already know what their monthly usage is based off of that year, or based off that month, then we know roundabout what they're going to end up using.
Go ahead.
All right, Jody. Because I think they just
She's
said,
got all the answers.
she just said like a certain gallons.
And everybody knows how much that is. We have a tiered rate right now, and the way it works is anybody who uses up to 4,000 gallons is billed this rate. Between 4,000 and 25,000, your rate changes to this, and over 25,000, your rate changes to that. It doesn't matter how much you used last year compared to how much you used this year, that type. It's every month how much you use that month. And you don't get split into 3 different rates. If you go above that rate, everything goes up.
sewer and
To the next.
sewer and trash and all of it.
No,
But, and,
we're talking only
yeah.
water.
and Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilman Leatham, I don't support any type of rate where it's dependent on the number of occupants or any personal information or that's too intrusive. You can pretty much judge by the square footage of the yard and the house as to what the kind of usage is acceptable once overly used. And it's user pays. I mean, if somebody who has a 2-bedroom shouldn't probably pay as much as a 5-bedroom. So we can do that. In the bigger picture, we have so much room to improve. I mean, just controlling the leakage, putting basic conservation like small flush toilets, low flow shower heads, education, some basic policies. We can move the needle very far in water conservation before we get into some of the more radical things you're going to see in the valley or in the high area.
Before, I think I brought it up at a previous council meeting, was Springerville went and did their city council started sending to every single resident was ways to conserve water. They sent out shower heads that didn't use as much water to every single resident of there.
Yeah.
They sent out told them that this is how to conserve water. Put a brick in your toilet. You have these old toilets that it would help save the cost of water. So we had talked about that. You would express your concerns about how much it would cost us to send that out. But in looking at this, it might be worth the cost to send all that out to our residents if it's going to save us our water.
No, and that is part of this. Well, as we get on to, we need to come up with kind of the baseline, and then what is the best bang for the buck, and what has instead of taking a little bit of money diverting from leaky lines, if we can buy everybody the valves or whatever. I think we need to find that sweet point to where we can maximize the savings as soon as possible, because the sooner you start saving now, it saves in the future.
Do we anticipate any funds or grant money coming from the federal or the state because of the conservation issues we're having, water conservation?
Oh,
More incentives to our residents is what we need to get.
And we do talk at the very end. We talk about a lot of the major items we'll be looking at, but we're all over this. The federal government's all over this. Federal government is looking for infrastructure and improvements. Do you guys want to speak to that, since the mayor asked? What kind of grants we're looking for?
You want to wait until we get to that
Or-
slide? Or just jump around?
Yeah, on the next slide we kind of talk about. Okay.
Okay, so good segue. Next thing under water conservation is conservation education. Send out flyers, just like you read my mind. And send out flyers, have talks to the community, bring up this type of conservation in just about every open meeting we have. It's a good information to be out there, especially in these times, because I think I heard on TV one night where they were talking about the Colorado River, and they said that climate is not going to solve that. It's going to be conservation that solves that. Is the only chance they have. So I think that's it.
And Mr. Mayor, members of council, I just wanted to make one statement. The members of the lower Colorado River Basin have known that they're overusing their allocations, that the future was that it was going down, yet still they were overpumping. They couldn't come to agreement until the federal government had to step in. It's a problem of the change in the climate, but it's also a problem of the government not being willing to react properly and timely in an interstate conflict. And so to a point, it's some bad planning.
So to move on, some things that are free for us is participate in regional discussions, talk to the county, to the cities around and so forth, get a plan together. Also come up with some water smart self-assessment. As for instance, at the pool, we decided to get away from the seeding and sod up there and go to AstroTurf, which is going to require a lot less maintenance as far as water consumption. So, and then once we get together with these communities, we need to talk about the outcomes of these meetings, and if there's anything that we can bring back to our council and say, this is something that we should implement, this is something we should take a serious look at. And then and then any feedback from, any of the, not only these type of regional meetings, but, any of your local meetings that you would have, like the mayor's forum and so forth, anything you would talk about this. We need to bring that back to the staff, in the form of putting together some sort of talking points, for a later presentation on things we could do that wouldn't cost any money, that we could actually conserve, water consumption within the city. So, also on the operational side, I just wanted to talk about the things that are going right now, the rate, studies that we're doing right now. We're making sure that we're in line, with the rates that we're charging. I know that every year we have this discussion to make sure that we fall within the 1.2, for WIFA, but we also need to make sure that we're charging what's fair, and if we can't afford something, we need to know about it. So we also are, we have in our CIP, in our Public Works CIP, to develop our asset management. I think that's a very, very important part, because the asset management program will let us know what money we have in the ground. If you look at it like we talked about before, between the water lines and the tanks and the pumps and all that, we probably have close to $200 million of water infrastructure. And if you add the sewer onto that, you're talking probably close to half $500 million worth of infrastructure out there. With all we have, we need to account for that. Okay, and also we're currently doing our proactive maintenance program. This is what I talked about before. John's picking the most trouble areas that he has. I think 4th Street is one of them, and Daybreak. There's a couple more that's being developed right now, and within that scope of money that was allocated by the council for the CIP. And we're gonna do that proactive maintenance to make sure we aren't out there fixing water lines in the middle of the night again. So, and then the meter audit that we're doing, it's in the CIP. It's in the process right now, going through the procurement process, and it's for $250,000. And then we also established the priority-based replacement program. I think that this is something that we've been working on for quite a while, but we've been looking at the worst, and we're kind of past that now. So we need to look at what's bad that needs to be replaced next, and not the lines that break every 5 feet, because we've replaced most of those. It's the lines that maybe break every 10 feet. So we have a lot of bad lines in the city, but a lot of them are very old, but don't cause us trouble too. So we need to look at those. So then for the need for additional funding. So what we really need to do is do a citywide water line study. We need to find out where our water leaks are. We need to find out where our valves are leaking. We need to find out if the valves are in the right places, if the cleanouts are in, the shutoff valves are in the right place where we can isolate an area. If an area is being fed from more than one direction, we need to make sure that our pumps and our PRVs and everything is working at optimum for our system. So we need to hire an outside entity to come in and do a city line water line study, or citywide water line study. So the other thing that the other study that we need is a hydrology study. This will study the groundwater and the aquifers in the area. It'll show us how much. We have no idea how much water is in our aquifers right now. We have a sense because we know how much deeper we're going or how not so deep we're going as far as what it was 20 years ago. But we have no idea the amount of acre feet that's in those aquifers. A hydrology study would tell us that. So, and that would probably be done by a hydraulic engineer and geologist.
Now, wouldn't they need cooperation from San Carlos?
They would need cooperation from everybody. And usually, we had talked about doing one once before, back, I think, when you were mayor. And we had talked about doing one before, and what we were gonna do is get St. Carlos in the room along with Globe and Miami and Eden County and everybody that would benefit from that. And even at that point, I think it was said that even the mines in the room, because they benefit so much from our water table as well. So, I mean, that was talked about, it never was followed through on, but it was talked about. And I think that's one of the things that we need to apply for funding for, is to get that study so we know what we're dealing with. And then, assess asset management study, I mentioned before that John has about $120,000 in his asset management budget to do water, wastewater, and public works. And that's mainly for having somebody to set it up, but we would also need to implement something in the budget to do a yearly upgoing, continue upgrading of the asset management program as well. So, and then develop a 50-year water resource program. So what I was talking about before is we know what we need. We know how many lines need replaced. Let's figure out, just like the asphalt, let's figure out how to do them in the next 50 years. 50 years from now, the lines that are really great right now may not be that great. So, so we need to plan in advance on how to replace those. And if you're looking at $100 million to replace what lines you have today, you might be looking at 200 million 50 years from now. So we need to start something, and then like any plan, we need to adapt to it as we go along. So,
Mr. Mayor?
my words.
So here's the bottom line. A few weeks ago, I attended the Arizona Growing Water Smart seminar, which is a 2.5-day review of our resources. And I want to comment on two or three things. These two documents that have been sent to you, please read through them. They kind of encapsulate everything we've been talking about here as well as at the seminar. And especially the second one, which is a team action plan, which is a way forward carrying these thoughts and these goals that we just discussed. This isn't a commercial, this is a way forward. And some of our staff, all of our staff that attended, have been voluntold to participate into these way forward meetings. And the very last thing you mentioned was one of the things we highlighted on day one. Where are the other players? We were asked that. Who are your other team players in your region? And we're only talking about Tarver region, Cobra region, Arizona Water Company, China Miami was there. We mentioned the mines and other entities that have their own water needs. And so over that 2.5-day period, we and all the other teams that were there were doing the same thing. What's our future? For me as a retired emergency manager, what's our backup plan? And the good discussion that I just heard today helps a lot to tell me, yeah, we've got plan Bs everywhere. We've got a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of needs that are available, or funding that's available to address our needs both today and in the future. Which are things, Mr. Mayor, I think you can carry forward some of those thoughts when we go to Washington next week. The point being is that there is a way forward, and we certainly would like to invite all of the entities in the area to attend these kinds of meetings that we're about to kick off going into April. We're not going to solve them overnight, but we do know that there's a ton of federal money. It seems that every time we turn around the last couple of years, there's another source of revenue. And that's very important for us to know that there are dollars out there that we can apply to some of these CIPs that we are immediately trying to solve and to address into the future. These studies, just like anything else, are very important.
And Mr. Mayor, members of council, I think Linda would like to address a couple of things that we just discussed. Linda.
Councilman Gonzalez, thank you for attending the Water Smart Forum. Now, that opportunity, the city received, the city, the town, all the participants that attended that conference, they were part of the Watershed Partnership Group, which we've been participating in for a little over 3 years. So yes, absolutely, our partners, our community partners, the stakeholders that that water impacts are absolutely crucial to have at the table as we continue this conversation. And so, looking at our water needs presently and in the future, and looking at aging infrastructure that we know that we can't write a check for tomorrow, replace all 100 whatever miles that we do have. And so Jerry, absolutely, he's well versed us. He's leaving us with a great game plan. We need to tee up to be ready for this funding that's coming down the pipeline. And by being in the partnership, having a watershed action plan, participating in the forum, which our staff spent 3 days on, they came back with an action plan. These are all sequential steps that help prepare us for grant funding that is coming, and that we can demonstrate, of course, the need. Being a rural community, it's never been better to be rural than it is right now. In fact, as Councilman Gonzalez said, meeting with RD Rural Development in DC, that is our number one meeting. There is so much funding. That's rural development, USDA, where we've applied to them for earmark funding for the fire department. We also do is that where we're tapping in for the ladder truck? Yes. So there's a lot of facets there that typically you wouldn't think about for USDA. The Northeast Sewer Extension, water infrastructure opportunity. These are all projects that we are preparing ourselves to have strong applications for. So we have Cristobal Moll, our San Carlos manager here. Thank you so much for coming today. And we absolutely do need to continue to sit down. This is not a one-time conversation, but a continued conversation, how we can work well together to ensure that we have water for all of our region and neighboring communities. So again, thank you for the opportunity to send staff. So kind of to circle back, all of these steps we are taking to access the funding that is coming. And there were funding opportunities that occurred in January. We weren't ready for them because we didn't have those foundational documents, the studies that are very crucial in applying for this funding. And so by spending the time to tee up, we can apply for some funding that's coming back to be available in October, and then again next January. So we're looking at preparing ourselves to apply for this funding about every 6 months.
I guess the last two things I want to say to add to that. We had a presentation there, Linda, from WIFA and Arizona Department of Water Resources. And they had immediate grants available if we could get documents into them by the end of April, I guess. And most of us felt, well, we're not going to meet that deadline. That doesn't mean funding goes away. There's other opportunities if you have shovel-ready projects. So that's the whole point of it. The second and most important thing is any outreach programs that we might brainstorm up here, some of them were presented during the seminars. A lot of that work has been done already. And we all agreed as entities to share with each other. All we have to do is make a phone call. Hey, do you have something on xeriscaping? Do you have something on outreach and education for improvement in water lines around the home? Personal or home lines. A lot of those programs in Arizona have already been created and been put into use and have been very successful. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel on this. They're available, educational outreach is available already. So we need to remember that, not to work so hard and just pick up the phone and ask them.
So I'm total geek and I love watching these things. But one of the things that some communities are starting to do now in Tucson is where they do the curb cuts. Because generally our goal as a community has been get the water off the streets and out of town as fast as possible, right? Which means all of our drainage is going to probably one of the creeks and it's gone, right? We don't get to use that water, we don't retain that water. So like when you do a curb cut, you create a swell where you have the tree where the tree goes and the plants go, it's a little bit lower. So it fills up, and then once it fills up, it just now continues right down the gutter again. And so I was looking to see what areas we had where we could do that. And we do have several areas where we could do basically a curb cut and allow a swell. But most building codes don't allow it. And so we'd have to look at that, and I know that Tucson is one of the ones that has changed the way they're doing that. And then the other thing I wanted to know is, gray water you can use, then you can't use it, then you can use it. And I don't know what version we're on today. But if we wash our clothes, having that go out to a tree or something, wouldn't that be a better use of that water? And then rain harvesting, some areas you can rain harvest, in other areas you can't, so I don't know, where are we at? Can we rain harvest? Can we have water barrels we use to water our grass, or our trees, or our flowers, or whatever?
Why don't we have catchments in this creek to catch the water that's running right now?
Because, so all the water off this watershed belongs to SRP.
The Army Corps of Engineer kind of governs that too, so. But those are good comments, curb cuts with, detention, basins in them. Is a good way to water plants, especially city plants, if, because we don't have to keep hauling it in time after time.
And they're finding it's recharging their groundwater too. So, maybe that would work us with a conglomerate,
I did want to follow up on something that Linda started. The studies that I talked about before, the waterline, citywide waterline study, the hydrology study, and the asset management, or even the 50-year. What that does is gives us a basis and a scope to go out for grants and to go out for funding opportunities. You don't always need shovel-ready jobs, but you do need to have them scoped, and you do need to have them thought out. So even if you haven't put the money out for design, you can always put a project out that's design build, as long as you have the scope and you have an idea what those deliverables would be. We don't have an idea of what we need until we do these studies, and I think that's a good point, don't you? It's very hard for Connie to go to the next level and ask for money, and she and I have been on the phone a few times, and the reason being is we haven't thought these projects out well enough. And for us to do them, I don't know that we have the expertise to do them. We're gonna have to get somebody in to look at the hydrology for the area, to look at the groundwater. And I think it was Melissa that pointed out the other day that if we have ideal situation on the ground, the runoff water, only a third of it goes back into the aquifer. The rest of it is absorbed, evaporated, whatever. And so it's not always, if we have a water break, oh well, it goes right back into our aquifer. Only a third of it does. And so it shows you why we need to consider, why we need to come up with some of these programs. And I guarantee you, and I've been doing it a couple of years, but I guarantee you, if you have these scopes and you have these studies, and you use these scopes and those studies, you can get grants. We have a lot of stuff here on the table. These are studies that were done in our water system over the last 20 some years that we ordered done, but they were for certain projects. They were studying the wells, or they were studying the tanks or something like that. But the information's there. It's a little outdated. Vince brought it in, make sure that you knew that we were doing some of this. It's just very hard to follow through when they're project specific. If they more generalized, like we're talking about here at Peace Study, it would be easier for the city to get a grant. So maybe I'm going to probably leave with telling you we're not in bad shape, but we're in the place where we need to think about the future. We need to plan on doing some of these things that are less expensive, the education, the programs, the study to get ourselves in line for grants. Those are things we need to get on right away. Make sure that you continue to fund John's CIP for his water line replacement, because of all the things that we've done since I've been here, that might be the most effective thing we've done so far, is the water line and the sewer line replacement. We have another sewer line break that Vince is working on right now, and we'll use the money that was put in that CIP to fix it, and it's emergency. So we're we're gonna utilize those things that the city, you have a very smart staff. So if you give them the tools that they need to get these projects done, they're gonna put your system in good shape. So I honestly believe that, so.
You know, Jerry, I think with the information you gave us today, and we know it's been coming, it's time that we quit, you know, just talking about it. I think we're to a point where we need to put some action to the words and start the process somehow, because if we don't, you know, we're gonna keep kicking it down the road. I think we need to do that now. I think there's a lot of new ideas out there, technology. You talked about the water evaporation, and there's studies out there for recovering water from the atmosphere. You know, how effective is that, and how much water can you actually recover from there? You know, the Forest Service had talked about putting barriers on our burn scar to not only slow down the flow of water, but also maybe recover some of that water into our aquifer. So that's another one. You know, somebody from the mines had discussed that they want to sit down and talk. What's the possibility of running a line from Roosevelt Lake? I mean, they'd be interested in water. The mines need the water too. So I think there's a lot of possibilities. I think we need to explore everything.
And something you said earlier too that really kind of hit home with me is about what happens if all the Cutter Field went down. I think that one of the things that we need to do as part of this hydraulic and groundwater study is to figure out an alternate well site. If we have one go down, maybe we need to drill in a different aquifer. You know, kind of spread our eggs out. Yeah, you know, so I think that's something we need to look at as a city as well, to see where it's more beneficial to maybe switch these out a little.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, redundancy is one of those factors we always need to have. The plan B is Councilman Gonzalez talks about, which we have pretty much in place. These are long-term problems or long-term solutions, but the time to start is now. You know, we're moving past our reactive phase into our proactive phase as a city in many areas, and this is just one of those that we need to do that with. Before we wrap up, I'd like to hear from the members of the staff that did attend that conference. I'm going to start with Vince, who's duly preparing his notes. Vince, what were your takeaways from?
So you can come up to the podium.
Or you can take the mic. You can sit from your seat. Yeah. Yeah. So what were your takeaways from that conference? And Luis, you're next. So just be careful.
My takeaways from that is that we do need to prepare. I think start with the easiest stuff, the policies, the water breaks. I think we've been doing a good job on like our holding tanks, our distribution pumps, rehabbing all those, keeping those tip top, but all the stuff underground is where we need to focus. I mean, education, we're not out there educating at all.
No.
We're so far behind like other communities. They have bigger resources, but we're just lacking in education and like the outreach. So.
Well, and Vince, thank you. Go ahead and pass the mic to Luis. But we're not suffering under the massive growth in population, which we hope to be soon. So that's another factor that we need to get ready for. Luis, takeaways from that conference?
Yeah. Well, you know, sometimes, you know, the use of water, we don't really think that much about it.
Oh, I'm not sure if the mic's on. Make sure the little light's on. Is it green?
Yeah.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah, I was saying that because the water is there, we don't think much about, you know, how important it is to think about, you know, trying to preserve, you know, the water, trying to find ways to use the water in a wiser way, try to use it so we don't just, you know, waste it. We were talking about the need for cultural change, you know, the people changes their way of thinking that can foresee what's coming in the future. And that is part of the education part that Liz was talking about. You know, kind of like make people more aware that now that we are here, probably we're not gonna have that need. But down the future, down the road in 30 years, future generation might have a problem, with water. There are several ways that we can accomplish what we were talking about at that conference. And there were a lot of different funding sources that we can, get a hold of. And as long as we show these people with WIFA, for example, that we are implementing, kind of like a new code, new regulations, and that we are a community that are concerned about, the way we use the water, those grants are out there. It's only that, as Gary was saying, it is important that we have a plan of action, that we have something implemented that, we can kind of follow. And as we go with that plan, we can find those funding, because they are there. We think that with the plan that we put together, probably is not perfect because it's just ideas that were thrown on the table. Kind of having the town of Miami globe, Gila County is important that, kind of gets in the same plan. And that way, as a community, and with all the stakeholders, like San Carlos, DHP, Arizona Water, and we're in the same community. So I think that making sure that the message goes across and is well taken, I think we can get good things done.
And Jody, what's that? Well, say it into the mic. You don't have to stand up.
She has so many good
Oh.
things to say earlier too.
No. So, any additional takeaways?
No, they all said everything just like I would have said it.
Just
Really, I mean, it was eye-opening though, to go to that forum, to listen to everybody else, that's probably in worse shape than we're in, like.
yeah.
So,
Well,
so many people that were there are in such worse shape, and so I kind of felt good about that, but you do realize like what you're not doing, that you could be doing to keep us from getting in that situation, or at least trying to do, stuff ahead. Education was just like the biggest thing, since we're not in that situation at this time. I think education is the biggest starting point to outreach and letting people understand, how it could be or whatever. But there was a lot of good information, and it's all down on paper. Mariano made copies for everybody. And so it was very eye-opening anyways to be there and learn a lot.
And to mayor and council, Melissa was there also. She had to step out for a second. She may be back, but she came back very excited, very wound up, and excited to be as a communication aspects. Do you want to?
So she just
pass
sharing.
the golden microphone here? And she.
I can talk loud.
Yeah, not YouTube loud.
So she's texting me right now. It's pickup time in school. So she's saying that by the watershed partnership participating in this facilitation and facilitations like this in the future, it opens us up to funding that's not available to every municipality. And again, it's never been so good to be rural. And like Jody says, it's cool. It's kind of encouraging to see that we're not in as bad a shape as we may think we are. But again, we're a 100-plus-year-old mining town, and so we do have our challenges. Mike wasn't on. And so again, she just sent a text. There is 2+ pages of funding opportunities that some were not teed up for yet, but we're working on that. So it's just very important for us to stay focused and again identify it in all of our planning documents, having meetings such as this that we can reference. because again, public meetings are required in some of these funding requests. And this was talked about at our recent, at council's recent strategic action planning, so it's identified in our update, and we'll make note of that, because again, that's a working document that is very important that we cite as we apply for future funding. And as Luis mentioned, it may be an imperfect plan, but it's a fluid plan that it can evolve as our city evolves. So it's a very exciting time. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, funders will give money to people who are serious about tackling the problem. We have the capacity to tackle it, and we have the seriousness to tackle it, shown by your leadership and our staff's follow-up.
One thing so Payson was really struggling with water, and at that time, the number that they were using was 140 gallons per person was the average daily consumption. And they got theirs down to, I believe, right around 90 gallons per person. And so one of the things that I would like to see us do is, even if we just start with like the schools and maybe the county buildings where we have a lot of public, just replace all the urinals with waterless urinals. We would save thousands of gallons in just a single day. And I just feel like maybe go after some low-hanging fruit first, and then expand from there.
How about our city facilities in doing that? We should do the same thing, lead by example.
Mm-hmm.
And again, those
There's just one more thing that I want to say, and I also mentioned it at the.
Grab the mic.
You hear me?
No, it's for the people on the
YouTube.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying that, and I also mentioned it at the conference, is that when I moved to Globe, I started working in my backyard, and I have new sprinklers, and I have a timer, and I have 3 sections of grass that I'm thinking in growing. But because it was already too cold, like November, December, I just decided, I'm just gonna do it next year when the weather gets a little warmer, so I can get good grass growing. And after going to this conference, it kind of changed my mind. I haven't put sod or seed or anything, but now I'm just gonna have a little piece of grass, and then I'm gonna have the rest more like deserts. And that's a change in mind, it's a change in my mindset, a cultural change, I would say. And that is something that it doesn't take much to let people know things, like we've been talking about here. And that makes people change the way they see the use of water. So that to me, that was very kind of like eye-opener. I myself maybe changed my mind.
And I will tell you that anytime somebody doesn't want something, they're going to say, well, we don't have water. And that's, I've seen that happen several times.
And John, did you have any last comments? Yeah. This is the man who takes on the responsibility of all this.
Mayor and council, just in closing on my part, I see a lot of things, we talked about the education for the public, but honestly, my focus is education for our staff. I see a lot of things that we can, getting to know the water system better with our own staff, and doing this kind of training. That was actually probably the culprit of telling some of our staff to go to this conference, but they came back with some positives. And I think that not just with the staff that and our admin that received this training, is our field guys. Some of the work that when we're locating this bridge project, locating lines where blue hydrants open, that's the kind of water that we see running down the street, and we should lead by example. To Councilman Rios' point, that should be metered as well. So those are the kinds of things that we see, we can deal with, and when we're trying to educate our public, and we're putting restrictions on, what's the first thing they're gonna say? They're cutting my water off of my grass in my yard, but they're blowing water down the street. Probably all got those phone calls or those thoughts. So one of my biggest points is to educate our own staff, just like we're doing in this kind of training, but the day-to-day use. That way we have those answers for our public and for you and your continued support. I've been, in the city for quite some time, and I've seen us make great strides and great improvements in a lot of the areas that we've been battling for many years. But this is the beginning of something to, like Paul, you mentioned, flipping it to be proactive, not so much reactive. And I think we're, just like with any other program, our asphalt program, our sidewalk program, with our parks, in our swimming pool, splash pad, all these things are in play with water systems. And I think it's really important that we maintain these and keep these up to where they need to be.
You know, Mr. Mayor, our moderator pointed out one thing in our initial phase of discovery of this information, the water loss. She pointed out, if you were able, with all the money in the world, to fix that water loss, what would that give you? Well, the point was, we would be able to apply it to our future development in the Northeast Corridor. Without even blinking, we'd solve that problem real quick. I know it's a long way to get there, and I know it's a tremendous amount of funding that we'd have to do, but we wouldn't have to be scrambling and worrying about the future in that particular corridor. It would be ready to go. And of course, I'm always about going after a plan B, but I really was excited to hear that. Solve one problem and you open up a whole new set of opportunities. So that was a really neat thought to get to.
And Mr. Mayor, members of council, we're talking about there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that the city itself can do. I think education is, as we've heard just from the comments, is the key. I think people, once educated, both staff and the public, will make their own voluntary choices to take on water savings just because it makes sense. And I'm not into, I don't see us ever as that community that has these hard and fast restrictions and compliance. I think voluntary compliance incentivize and encourage, and I think we can carry the day before we go. I don't see us ever going into anything more aggressive than that. So, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I think that is our conversation. It won't be the last one. So we have a few more items.
I think we just want to thank Jerry and all the staff really for your talk today and presentation, but supporting, I guess, what our vision is, to move forward and be aggressive, proactive in water conservation. I really appreciate the staff stepping up and being on board with this. So item 2 is new business. Item A is consideration to approve resolution number 1872, amending the designation of the fiscal year 2021 chief fiscal officer from the former finance director to city manager Paul Jepson to match the reporting signature of fiscal year 2021 annual expenditure limitation report filed within the Auditor General, and motion to waive section 2-10-10A prior discussion. Shelley, could you read?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution number 1872, a resolution of the City of Globe, Arizona, Mayor and Common Council, amending the designation of the Chief Fiscal Officer for officially submitting the fiscal year 2021 expenditure limitation report to the Auditor General. Is council pleased with that reading?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor and Council, if you please recall the March 14th meeting where council was presented Resolution 1870, amending or designating the Chief Fiscal Officer for fiscal year 2022 and 2023. We discovered that we needed to go back one more year to match those signatures with our audit report to the Auditor General, and this will do that. And then we are in compliance and up to date and ready to file our 2022 audit and in the future our 23 audit.
So you have a typo, I don't know if you looked at the auditor under the resolution number.
Oh, thank you.
I would move to approve resolution number 1872 as read and waive the prior discussion.
Second.
Motion second for approval of resolution 1872. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Any abstaining? Motion passed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Shelley. Item B is council will possibly consider providing the Miami, Arizona downtown economic resurgence made or a letter in support of housing and economic development for the town of Miami and request to waive section 2-1-10A prior discussion. Paul.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, they're seeking, Linda, is it redevelopment money. And because I'm not real, or if you want to jump up to the podium
Okay.
on this one, this was a quick request. They're trying to get something put together. We think there's no harm in us joining in because Miami is our front door, our sister city. So we have no problem with it. But Linda, you know a little bit more about this one.
My understanding, they're applying for technical assistance funding to develop a housing plan to a site specific in Miami. I believe it's around Mackey's Camp. And I think there's a facet to that will address will add another layer to our recent housing studies. It'll take a look at the, I think it's the workforce and the affordable side of that. And so I think this is just a win-win for all of us. It would help them advance a project specifically for the town of Miami, but it will also, again, be a planning document that we can all utilize as we're looking at housing in the region. So I would ask that you really do consider supporting this, and I think it's a great thing for the town of Miami and for the region as well.
And Mr. Mayor, members of council, we have not drafted the actual letter. We wanted to moving quick here and want to get this. We will get a draft that reflects the spirit of what they're seeking to our support. And I hear they're having a little bit of trouble with some of their federal logins, and we may be able to add a little technical support with that also. We do have a federal login guru in the audience who helped us get out of the jam that we got in with our transition period. So we'll put her to work.
And I understand they have the letters from the hospital and from Miami High School also.
Yeah, Miami High School, the hospital, the community college voted to do a letter of support as well. So I was kind of hoping we could get the city to also jump on with a letter. I don't think the grant requires it. They just think it'll make it more.
Oh yeah, always, yes. Regional support.
So, Mr. Mayor, if there's no further discussion, I would make a motion that we provide the Miami, Arizona Downtown Economic Resurgence NADER a letter in support of housing and economic development
for their organization.
And request to waive section 2-1-10A prior discussion.
Second. A motion and a second for approval of item 2B. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Any abstained? Motion passes. Thank you. Motion for adjournment?
And
Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you all for coming and doing this. We were going to do an infrastructure meeting, but I thought this topic was worthy of a full council. And so thank you all for pulling time out of your busy day. I think this is like the fifth council related meeting in less than a week. But thank you very much.
Okay.
Shelley's keeping track.
Appreciate you here. We'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Meeting